guys. So on the side, just to extend the introduction slightly, on the side of being the creator and host of the AR Show podcast, I also work at a display technology company focused on the micro display problem for smart glasses. So I have a day job in addition to this incredibly enjoyable side gig where I get to interview amazing people like Ross. And as for those of you that might just be lingering in, Ross and I were chatting a little bit about his background, inspiration that he got from living with llamas as a young man, and how that led him to flee the farm and go to pursue robotics at Carnegie Mellon and then MIT. And so we're gonna dive in. We'll continue a little bit on the technical side, and I want to continue with just laying the groundwork for what SLAM means from a practical perspective, and how that's related to the AR cloud, and maybe a couple of definitions about what AR cloud is, just to quickly lay down the groundwork for us.
Sure. Should I provide the framework, or?
I'm happy to explain the framework as well, but why don't we start? What does it mean to localize, and what does it mean to create a map in the SLAM definition?
Okay, so then there's this, taking one step back on that, SLAM is one of the technologies that you need for augmented reality, and then there's other areas. So SLAM kind of, it's now been an overarching, so from the pure technical definition, it means simultaneous localization and mapping. So that means knowing where you are in the world and knowing what's around you in order to help influence where you are. So you can have a robot navigate through the world. So that is kind of the fundamental SLAM problem is you put a robot in an unknown environment and it builds a map and figures out where it is in that environment in real time. So a robot needs to make decisions. Augmented reality uses SLAM as one component. It also uses other technologies along the way, such as visual inertial odometry, so camera with a IMU, gyroscope, accelerometer, which is more like AR kit, AR core style technology. And then there's like large scale, like structure from motion, which is more Google's VPS. You see a lot of the mapping stuff in there. So SLAM is one mapping component, but in the augmented reality space has now kind of taken a bigger breadth of the airspace. So just in terms of technologically grounding that. So what is localization? Localization from a technical perspective is knowing your pose, which is like your XYZ, or think about it like your GPS coordinate as you're in a car, like, hey, my car is here and not like very far away. In an augmented reality context, it's knowing that down to like centimeters, potentially. So then it is really just where am I in the world and just being more accurate than GPS. Mapping is, again, it's an overarching term with many different areas. So then there's mapping like Google Earth style of, hey, let's do a photo reconstruction of a very large scale. Then there's kind of reconstruction of this. Then there's kind of sparse mapping. Then there's kind of short-term mapping, long-term mapping. So at least in an augmented reality context, we touch on a lot of those. There's different companies that kind of brand themselves as AR cloud companies. Some of them do 3D dense reconstruction, which is like, okay, I want to be able to paint this or color this in a certain way and know all the different geometry. So if I throw a ball at it, it bounces off in the right way. Another thing that you need for like just figuring out where you are, you may need a more sparser representation. So dense versus sparse is considered how photorealistic it is versus can a computer compute where you are in the world, which, long story short, there are many, probably like 6 or 7 different technical versions of mapping that in the academic space you come into that are now kind of all being grouped into a subset of the overarching term of the AR cloud today.
Awesome. And so AR cloud, though, as we think about it, we have several startups, including major companies like Niantic, developing additional capabilities that kind of take advantage of and extend this idea that we understand what's around us. And then to be able to act on that. You gave the example of understanding the bottle well enough that you might be able to impact some physics. Throw the ball bounces in a way that you might feel real. What are these kind of key capabilities of the AR cloud in your mind that go beyond understanding roughly where you are and what's around you?
So starting off less specific but higher level, things in the AR cloud, or my company Escher Reality before was kind of the back end of AR. The idea is what augmented reality tech works better running on the cloud. So then the difference there is if you run it on the device, it's more of an SDK style. company, and then that's more of a licensing business model, but then things that are run on the cloud are more of a service. So that's things that can't run efficiently, or they just run better on the cloud. Like you can't download all of Google onto every device to then be able to index it and search it all locally. That makes sense to be done on the cloud. So like obvious ones that people look at are visual positioning. Google has different things with visual search. So saying like, hey, look at this, and like, what type of water bottle is this? Where can I buy this water bottle? Like go around from there. So things for the AR cloud are usually where there's not enough data, or you need global data in the local environment. So there's technologies with that you can do that, like rendering on the cloud can help on there. It's less in the AR, but helps with the computation of the specific devices that you need at the endpoints. But yeah, in terms of the different technologies, localization is one, getting information of the real world. So at Niantic, we think of this as the real world is content. And then that can open up a whole lot of different areas that I can't get into too many of the specifics, but you should be watching our games over the next, or soon.
Yeah, soon. So this notion of kind of recognition, understanding is kind of what you're hinting at. One of the demos that we saw a little while back was Pikachu running behind a potted plant, behind a person. So you have a notion, an understanding of the world well enough to know that something's behind something else, right? That this bottle and this phone are at two different depth planes, and there's actually a gap in between them in which you could at least perceive that this Pokemon is running, something along those lines. So you have this notion of occlusion as an additional component of the AR cloud. Multiplayer, two people can play at the same time. It's another one of the demos we saw. People are in this very nice building. I don't know where it was shot, in San Francisco.
Ferry building.
Ferry building, there we go. And they're all playing a game at the same time, so you have this multiplayer simultaneous. They all perceive the same virtual experience, the same place at the same time. And all of these are elements of kind of your notion of the AR cloud platform. Is that fair?
Yep.
And so we have other companies that are building elements of this. In some ways, it feels like a big company problem. Google is very actively pursuing, you talked about a couple of those types of capabilities, the visual positioning, which is using the camera to help understand where you are to the centimeter level accuracy, that's the goal. Doing visual search, doing a bunch of other things. Apple's building out elements of this. We have other startups that are presenting here during the conference, 60.ai, Ubiquity 6. They're building out these sorts of capabilities. What is Niantic's perspective that's different, that's missing from the things that they're doing?
So a major one is approaching it from a product standpoint and less of a tech standpoint. And this is actually something in my own kind of growth as an entrepreneur I've come to appreciate a lot. So like there's the MIT style companies that they make a great hammer and they're always in search of a nail. That's how my company initially started, where we were like, oh, okay, this will be useful. And then we kind of, as the market developed, it happened to be kind of in line, so our timing was fairly well. But at Niantic, focusing on what is the user experience, what do the consumers want, and what is the technology that enables it to be fun. So like augmented reality is a technology, it's not an application. AR by itself is not valuable. I said this a couple times before, and maybe this is controversial in this audience especially, but AR is 2 steps away from a customer. So like AR should become invisible, and it should all be about the experience and the user, and in the gaming space, since we're in a gaming track, delighting the user and making sure that it's fun. And how much tech you need to enable that. Like the first version of Pokemon Go, which is, I still think to this day, the most widely used AR application on the planet by like an order of magnitude at least. It fulfilled the fantasy for users that they're a Pokemon in the real world and gave that first impression that made it really impactful for people to go around the world. How much technology did you need for that? Kind of like a little bit. Now we're adding in more and more. But then for Niantic, we like to connect, or we especially focus on connecting what is the end user experience that we want, what is the application, rather than kind of trying to boil the ocean and just build all the tech that you need, and if you build it, they will come. So I think that that's one key differentiator, which shouldn't be, and it's just a little bit more of a mindset change. Second is we work, and the title of this track is Planet Scale AR. The scale at which we work at for augmented reality applications and with our user base is like tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people all around the world. Like, how do you have millions of simultaneous users kind of working on this stuff? Then as a startup working in augmented reality, like you can do, these demos, you can set up booths here, like these are all fantastic. Trying to get this all working for tens of millions of people all around the world is like a new level, which Niantic has a lot of experience working at. So then, when Pokemon Go launched, there were a lot of lessons learned. And then there were like 4 back-end engineers, and you ask them, how did July 2016 go? And their eyes kind of glaze over, and they're just like, So then if you know behind the scenes, like exactly all that went down there, it was really impressive. And then all the systems that we've been working on and building towards since then have been not only to improve that for the augmented reality space, but just a general like location-based platform to begin with, that most people don't realize that if you're thinking about augmented reality in the real world, it's not just, or there's so many other types of systems. We've released some blog posts on that most people don't realize that when you actually have a massive kind of user base and a product that's out there, that you need to fill in all of these different holes. And then kind of AR is one component of a larger ecosystem or larger technology platform that you need. And so Niantic, we work with it at scale with experience and are product focused.
Just to clarify, because we might have a mixed audience who is familiar with VR, and location-based means something different in VR land versus AR land. But here in the world of mobile, location means the experience depends on where you are, as opposed to in VR land, location means you go to some destination or to have the experience at like a mall or some sort of VR cafe. Can you talk about some of the lessons that were learned during that initial Pokemon Go rollout? It's probably a bit more successful than maybe the company was initially anticipating. Beyond that surprise, were there other things that you just did not think through that you learned along that path?
And to be clear, like kind of the main people who deserve all the credit there, like I came into Niantic through an acquisition after all of this. So this is part of the amazing original team at Niantic. But speaking for those great people, like just, where to begin? So one, you just realize that a lot of the tech assumptions that you make break down when you have like 100 million people downloading something in a day, or like of that order of magnitude. So then you say, oh yeah, this software package works in this way, and then all of a sudden like, okay, it's massive, and you're like, well, it did work on that way, and then you're just like, but this is larger than like kind of what could ever fit on like a massive computer in a data center. You begin to realize like Niantic has one of the best anti-GPS spoofing systems. So it's like us and Uber that I think are, I don't know for certain, but I think are like some of the best at detecting GPS spoofing.
Why is that important?
Because it's actually part of the mission of Niantic, getting people out exercising, socializing, and exploring. And then if people are at home and GPS spoofing that they're off in Tokyo or Paris or wherever to catch rare Pokemon there, then it actually defeats the purpose of the game. So then it's a way of cheating against the experience. So then that kind of is not the type of experience that we want as a company. And then, that's been kind of majorly developed. There's all the networking systems, like you begin to realize that sometimes the fiber optic cable and cell phone towers is not sufficient. So then how do you begin to handle like some of the infrastructure problems that you can have for having kind of large scale experiences? There's a whole laundry list of technical problems, but then also just like security for the company, of just making sure that like you guys can walk home safely from Niantic when like half of the city is playing your games in a sense. So then there's social things that learned, and like, okay, like my parents' company up in Idaho that wasn't associated with the llamas, like that was labeled as a major Pokestop, and they did some defense work. And then all of a sudden, all these Pokemon Go players were huddling outside the entrance to a defense contractor. And then my parents, this was before I joined Niantic, were like contacting Niantic saying, hey, stop that. Like security people are like on edge about all this. And then all the lessons learned from there. So anyway, there's like, we could spend like 5 hours going through all of that, and I'm not even the best person to talk about it, but it gives you a taste of the type of things that you realize of putting out a system like that, okay, you budget for one number and you get like 10 times that in the first day.
So one of the other things you talked about, which sets Niantic apart, is you're not just building technology for the sake of technology. You're really focused on what is the end user experience you're trying to create. What are the experiences you're trying to enable with the platform you're creating?
I mean, if you're talking about the different games and IP, I can't go into that. So, but we want to make the world more engaging. So the way I like to phrase it is we want to make the world a more interesting place. A little bit of spin on the Silicon Valley term of making the world a better place, so that people want to enjoy and look at the world in a different way, and then help them kind of understand, like the first app for Niantic was Field Trip, which was a Wikipedia for the world. So you can go around, like, learn about, okay, well, here's the Santa Clara Convention Center, and then, oh, that was built at this time, it has this thing, here are the different events associated with it. So then that was kind of getting information out of the world. Then Ingress, a little bit more of a spy game, then you have like a kind of a different layer of reality over the world that they can like understand, complete different missions while most people don't realize you're doing it. Pokemon Go, hey, there's Pokemon everywhere. So it's kind of thinking about the world in a different way and providing another layer of viewing it is kind of the high level. In terms of the specific experiences, can't talk too much about the private ones, unfortunately, sure. But yeah.
So it's really, that's partially, it's not just maybe the fact that you are cognizant that the technology is 2 steps removed from the customer, that you're really trying to enable experiences, you're thinking about it in that way. It's also the specific types of experiences that you're enabling. And so the platform is being optimized in that direction.
Yeah, so then if you think about, like, there's a lot of examples in augmented reality for tabletop demos. So then you can have like your wizarding chess sorry, that's not meant to be a Harry Potter reference, but like you can have a chess battle on there and stuff moving around on a tabletop. The type of technology that you need for that is not, or is different than what you need for having something massive in the real world, where a whole bunch of people can play. And maybe that you have different scenarios and different locations at different Pokestops, different Pokemon come out, different Ingress portals for Harry Potter and other games in the future. And there's kind of different things that you can do on there. So at Niantic, kind of I view that technology is 2 steps away from a customer, but also the current augmented reality tech race is 2 steps ahead of the application race at the moment. So then most people, a lot of AWE at the moment is building a lot of really amazing, fantastic technology getting out there. But then the iteration cycle with the developers who are building off of it is a little, or is less connected than I think that it should be. So Niantic, that's one of the things that we try to do. We try to push the edge of the cutting edge of the technology, but then also bring up the applications with it. So then you're both brainstorming, demoing, and then funneling that into the products. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, it's the applications that matters. That's what makes the platform. So that's why everyone's viewing like the killer app is always extremely important. Pokemon Go is one AR killer app. We hope that there's more. But then having that iteration cycle and making sure that the application space is moving at the same rate and catching up to the tech race is extremely, extremely important. And for all the people building platforms and developers out there, maybe we should do like one group raises their hand, another group raises their hand, and then like all you guys kind of talk, and then over lunch, because having that cycle is extremely important and also can influence the different technologies that are built. Like for our platform, we make sure that everything is connected to the different products that we want to make, rather than an if you build it, they will come.
To that end, you have partnered with Warner Brothers on creating the next experience around Harry Potter. How are you collaborating with them as you build out your platform?
So I've had different Niantic execs, Warner Brothers execs all come around me that I'm not supposed to be the one to talk about Harry Potter. We have a wonderful co-development relationship with Warner Brothers, and we're excited to work on Harry Potter together. We have a lot of technology. They have a lot of game experience. We have game experience. It's a great collaboration. I've had too many threats, so I can't really say too much about that.
I want you to stay employed on Monday, so
Yeah.
maybe pause there.
Throw me under the bus.
One of the things that you had mentioned was one of the lessons learned from the early Pokemon Go days was that there's a risk in accidentally putting a Pokestop in a place that is either not desirable or dangerous in some way. And there's all this, so you end up having these challenges around kind of this public versus private spaces thing also. How do you think about where you draw the line? How do you think about public versus private spaces? How do you think about the data behind that and the risks that it might impose on your users?
So for us, like, we are very cognizant of the kind of the lines that are being drawn, and we are being very conservative in how we approach that. So every Pokestop, every ingress portal is actually crowdsourced by our users and validated by our users as, hey, this is an okay place to play a game. This is kind of a safe place. It is then vetted, is there any inappropriate content, everything else, so that that is kind of judged by that as before it even goes out to the users. So we have a whole process associated with that. And for any of those hardcore Ingress players, you should know that more in depth. So then we focus on outdoor public spaces. Private spaces, that's kind of its own different ball game, which kind of us being kind of get outside, explore, socialize. We want to enable this in the real world and all the public places that people are going. So for us, we take a conservative approach to a lot of the kind of privacy aspects and making sure that it's not just, hey, here's what's the letter of the law, or here's what's even possible. It's here's what directly benefits our users, working with our users to kind of build this together. And yeah, we are definitely on the conservative side for handling all of that and make sure that we do the right thing.
Are there any property rights concerns? Like you talk about Pokestop, which is a major feature of the game. There's a lot of activity that draws people together, but there's also Pokemon themselves that respond to different places that people are going and pursuing. How do you approach the Pokemon? Is it a similar sort of problem that based on where people go in the world, you identify where is a safe place to kind of put Pokemon?
Yeah, so for us, we like have blacklisted areas. If people complain, we work with that and say, hey, like this is only open between these hours. And then like kind of we have people showing up at like midnight and it's like, okay, that's not okay. But they want them there during the day. So then we have advanced systems behind the scenes to try and handle those scenarios. And then in terms of like property rights and everything else, this gets into an interesting angle. Like, okay, if you're given like a GPS path and it goes through there, like, okay, like should you go through? Like, it doesn't tell you to go over a lawn for directions, or at least I hope not. But yeah, in terms of there's kind of a bigger meta question in who owns the digital property rights in an augmented reality or digital twin world, as some people call it. And that's actually, like, there's pros and cons to that. Like, if you look at a private house, but you can see what you want to see on it, is it you as the viewer that has to analyze, or is it you as the viewer that controls what you see? Or is it the house owner that has the private property to control what is seen of their different home? And I don't know the answer to that. And I think like us as an industry, we need to begin to figure that all out. There's a whole bunch of interesting things that, again, I view just get down to the root problem of, like, is it the viewer or the viewee that controls what is seen? So then for different people, like maybe kind of my brother might see me and I have like weird different bunny ears and he finds that really funny at family reunions or whatever, like, and I'm annoyed that he's laughing at me. Is that kind of, does he have the right to see me in the way that he wants to see me, or do I have the right to be viewed in the way that I want to be viewed? Same for property rights, same for people, same for like dogs, like those type of questions. One, we're not approaching them, or Niantic is the first company approaching them from a higher level in terms of different Pokestops and Pokemon spawning areas. We're not sure exactly everything I can say. being as careful and as appropriate as we can be, and working in the right ways to the best of our ability. But then as augmented reality in the future, like 10, 20 years from now, there's going to be a whole lot of interesting questions that I don't think the industry has the knowledge yet to even begin to approach them, or what are all the different nuances, in the same way that like kind of how people are viewed on the internet is still being discussed now with a lot of the social media. I view that there's going to be another wave of these type of questions that we need to run into 20 years from now as this whole field develops.
You'd mentioned, based on the story you told about your parents, where the Pokestop was outside of their place of work and it wasn't really a great place for those people to be. As an example of how much...
To be clear, Niantic cleared that all up.
Okay, good. But it's an example of the profound impact that an experience like Pokemon Go can have on the real world. It's not just about those people having an enjoyable experience, getting out of their houses, wandering around, getting exercise, whatever it is. They're also impacting retail spend. Like their foot traffic is dramatically impacted by what you're doing. Are you taking advantage of that? How are you thinking about the influence that you can have there, whether positive or negative, whether you extract value from that?
So Niantic public, if you're playing the game, like we work with different sponsors of different sponsored locations to kind of like encourage the game. You don't need to kind of go through any direct advertising or whatever. That's its own can of worms. Don't want to go down the Facebook path. And then, but yeah, so we do have sponsored locations, like kind of locally around here. There's like Starbucks and Sprint and a couple other locations around the world. We have different locations that kind of like make it that a new location can be fun and viewed in a different way, to have different raids associated with it. I mean, for us, we are very cognizant to make sure that it doesn't like dilute and enhances the experience. But yeah, we do have sponsored locations, and I mean, we have the gaming side, and that kind of enhances it, but not in a interruptive way, like, no, you need to watch this for 30 seconds before you can proceed in the game. You can choose if you want to engage with that or not as you walk around and explore the world.
The many ways is kind of a hint at the many ways that the set of capabilities that AR enables will really dramatically impact human behavior. And that's probably its own 5-hour conversation, but this is an interesting one. Let's pause right here. We'll do a quick.
I interrupt, I'm so sorry.
No worries.
I wanted to let everyone know that our 9:30 speaker is canceled, and as a result, we get to hear this for longer, which I'm very excited about. So I just wanted to make sure if you wanted to move in or out that you had a moment to do that. And then maybe we should start taking questions if that's okay, or whenever you feel like it. But
So we have until 10?
I think you pretty much have until 10.
All right. So we'll keep going for all of you that are eager to go to the other 9:30 sessions. You're making a mistake. For everybody that's sticking around, thank you. We'll go in. I definitely will open it up for questions, but maybe I'll wait until we're at about 9:50 or so. We'll leave the last 10 minutes for questions. So think through the.
Let's leave 20 minutes for questions.
20 minutes for questions? Great. We'll do 20 minutes for questions, and then I'll ask more if we don't have enough audience. So as you talk about, so Niantic, we'll come back to this from this perspective. Niantic was born from, as Athena, kind of the mind of Google and the Google Maps team. And but the company was started, at least in the public eye, building gaming experiences. Ingress, Pokemon, you're now working on Warner Brothers. These titles have already been massively successful from a financial perspective. Why bother? Why bother creating a platform under which that you'd make generally available to other sorts of developers? Why not just build your own games, your own experiences in that, and not make the platform generally available?
I mean, that's kind of a vision and direction company, which John Hankey, our CEO, kind of can set that you can like, hey, let's make the experiences that people want, or let's enable all of this. So for Niantic to kind of work towards its mission, like we can accomplish things at a certain rate, and due to our kind of very fortunate financial position, we can even accelerate that rate in terms of how we get the type of experiences that we want. Now, for us to kind of take all those lessons learned from the different systems and putting in the new technologies that we view and connecting that to the applications, then that can be a way in which we can kind of grow the whole ecosystem. So that like all the lessons learned that we have in AR, all the lessons learned in the platform, then other people can benefit from that, which actually helps Niantic accomplish its overall kind of mission to help people kind of interface with the world in a better way and connect with other people. So then it is a way for us to broaden the impact of what the company has strived out to do to begin with, and then just from the DNA coming from Google, like John founded Keyhole, which then Google bought, which became Google Earth, and then he was the product lead for Google Geo. So like Google Earth, Street View, Maps, everything else. And then how can you interface with these maps in a different way? So then there's more kind of real world DNA from the kind of founding team of Niantic, and then also building up the gaming side as well. So Niantic is this kind of unique company that has a strong history from the technology side and then learned a gaming component on top of it, which now we're kind of world famous for. But then that DNA within the company kind of permeates through. So then for us to take that technology and make a broader impact on top of the world, like that's one of the best ways in which we can do that is through building a platform. And we are like by far a majority of the market right now. We have a lot of lessons learned. We have the technology skills from Google before and Google Maps, plus with like market share in the gaming side, which is where most development in consumer augmented reality is today. It's kind of this perfect storm that kind of comes together, and like a natural conclusion, and like the direction of the company has always been more tech focused than gaming focused from the very early days, because our first app was Field Trip, wasn't as widely known as even Ingress or especially Pokemon Go, but then it was not a game, and it was actually built for Google Glass. But then they went into mobile as a stepping stone because they're like, oh, Google Glass will take a while. So then went into the mobile space, and then have had massive success, and we've been very fortunate since then. So this is kind of just continuing along what has been the direction of Niantic, and then as the market develops, then kind of narrowing in on the specific place in which we fit in, which right now we view as pretty in a good spot.
Who are you hoping or expecting to use the platform? Is it just large companies like the Warner Brothers of the world, or?
No, so the main people kind of building off the platform, one, ourselves, obviously, so dog fooding our own tech, very, very important, and that's where this all starts, to kind of working with other studios, and then kind of building off the type of experiences in there. We have a developer contest for more smaller scale studios. So then for people unaware, we have $1 million contest for 10 studios to kind of compete to make new experiences built off of the platform. And then eventually kind of allowing more and more studios and people to build off of it, and even expanding outside of gaming in the long run. Gaming is just where we have a lot of experience right now, and that's where a lot of the consumer development in augmented reality is today. Consumer is a very different beast from like the enterprise training applications, and then we can kind of expand beyond just gaming into more and more consumer, and then grow out the capabilities of the platform from there.
How far do you intend to take those platform capabilities? Like, what are your ambitions?
As far as we can.
What are your ambitions? Are you going to have the complete digital
Want the
twin?
world. Is
You want
that
the
too
world?
much to ask for? Just the digital copy of all of it. To enable, again, not tech focused, but like to enable the type of experiences that people want to build, and to bring in gaming delight to the users or usefulness to people building off of it. But yeah, we're a fairly ambitious company, and we're in a very unique position at a unique time in a market. And yeah, we're going for it.
You're going for it. You're going to create a complete digital twin of the Earth, and a bunch of experiences off the back of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. You'd mentioned that the first experience that the company created was meant for Google Glass. And certainly there's a increasing amount of AR technology you're building to enable some broader set of experiences. What's the company's perspective on smart glasses today?
I mean, the future, if I may, the future of kind of AR is not this. I mean, we've done very, very well with that, but just people holding up their phones is not the kind of the future world of augmented reality that we all dream about, hope of, and like most of the people here talk about. Again, we view that mobile AR is a stepping stone to headsets. I personally believe that headsets are the stepping stone to robotics. Like an AR headset is the visual cortex of a robot. So then you'll see in probably 10 years' time, robots and AR being a little bit more blended together. The technology's not there yet, but like if you want to have, say, I view one of the big applications of augmented reality will be laptop screens. So then you have like kind of a couple of you have laptops in there. Imagine if you had like a 100-inch monitor and all you had to do is carry around a keyboard and a mouse. Like I would pay $3,000 for that. I think that's like an amazing application that you can do for this because we spend so much money. Again, it's not, I view that those type of experiences are not going to be done on mobile. I view that's a very valuable experience. There's a lot of enterprise stuff that is just easier to have. We were talking about this earlier, like one of the main values of augmented reality is just, or Jason was talking about it, don't want to take credit, but like it's just an easier way to get information quicker, faster, easier. So then that is like, if that's getting information from pulling it out of your phone versus just getting it instantly, right as you want it, as you need it, then that's kind of that's a different experience. So at least we are planning for headsets. We believe that headsets are coming. We believe that like mobile is a stepping stone to headsets. And yeah, if anything we can do to help promote that and make that faster so that we can make the type of experiences and enable the type of experiences that kind of Niantic dreams of and all of you here at Augmented Reality World Expo, like you guys dream of. So like that is the end goal. Right now we're doing just fine on mobile, but I think we can all do better in the next generation of mobile computing.
Maybe two more questions and we'll open it up to the audience as well. But the company, Niantic, made an investment in DigiLens, which is a lens company, optics company that's trying to help get that image from the display on the smart glasses and reroute it into your eye in a very efficient and small form factor way. Hardware, though, is kind of the key point here. Are you guys building your own smart glasses? Like, why is it that investing in hardware technology companies related to smart glasses is in Niantic's best interest?
So as I said, like we believe in the headset space and that coming out, so then we want to help promote the types of companies that we view are exceptional, that are pushing the boundary of that. We view that DigiLens is one of those companies. We've made other investments in different hardware, different software things to help build the ecosystem that we view as needed. So then if we can help out different companies from our unique positioning to build this future and bring it on faster. Some of the stuff we will be building internally, but some of the stuff we will also be working with external partners, working with other companies that can take other parts, because we don't want to boil the ocean of all AR tech, but then we want to boil some of it, but then kind of the more that we can help out other startups, other large companies through partnerships, the more that we can help build this future and have it come together, because like we know a lot of the technology and a lot of applications that we can be very specific and pointed and strategic about how we build this. And my hope is that Niantic's involvement in the entire AR market can help bring this 1-2 years quicker than kind of if it was without Niantic in the picture.
As you think about your real world platform, when you think about AR Cloud, do you imagine this is a winner-take-all market? It's going to be a kind of like search, where we have one massive player and then a bunch of small players, or do you think it'll be more widely spread with a bunch of specialized solutions?
I think it'll be a winner-take-most for consumer. So not all, but Because the thing about it is the most up-to-date map of the world is the most useful map that you can work off of. So then kind of if I build a map of this table and then like we see this, like, and every person on stage builds up a map, then you can kind of adjust it and kind of track it over time. So like my work at MIT was in kind of dynamic mapping. How do you handle the time component to all of this? So then as you get more and more kind of refreshes, or kind of as you're painting over the same space more and more, it becomes more and more valuable. And then the more kind of information you can tie to that, the more that the real world becomes content, then you can kind of make better experiences that are less brittle. So then you have network effects associated with the real world, just based off of the number of users, which is why I think it is a winner take most category. And then kind of as you get the first number of users going, then like there's kind of the social media style network effects with it from a more utility standpoint. Will there be other solutions? Absolutely. Kind of how much of the pie that everyone gets, I don't know. I think that there are some use cases where you're going to have like little islands, and I view that there are many, many use cases where it's kind of just makes sense to have kind of one. And then, yeah, how that's all going to exactly shake out, I don't know, but I do think that the network effects associated with kind of interacting with the real world make it that it's more likely that one map to rule them all. Maybe I shouldn't quote that.
One map to rule them all. There it is. With that, let's open it up to some audience questions if anybody has anything that's, yeah.
And we have until 10 to, then they want time to change
Oh,
the
okay.
page. Sorry.
Oh, I see, okay.
Yeah, so first, just thanks to both of you for having this conversation. It's great. Jason asked a question on this, but I was hoping to sort of probe a little bit on the topic around, you mentioned sponsored locations, but do you know if at Niantic you have a way of either tracking or researching or measuring some of the either cascading second or third order effects of the economics on the real world? So, for example, do you know of any businesses whose value went up because they were a Pokestop, or the impact on real estate prices, or do you know if the airline industry is seeing a increase in their revenue because people are flying to Tokyo for events? Like anything about the economics of the real world, do you track that or measure that at all?
So at least in terms of the type of well, if people pay you money for sponsored locations, they want to know that that's going somewhere. Like, so then so then in terms of the type of interactions and impressions that you can have with that, I'm not the kind of person who runs the sponsorship stuff, so my delay is not just like me choosing my words, it's just me trying to fill in the blanks in my own knowledge in that sense. So then I don't think I can talk, just due to my own experience, my own knowledge, too specifically about that, but just from a, like, kind of, yeah, if someone pays you money, they want to know that that money moves something. For us, as I say, we're on the more conservative side in terms of what we want to share with other people. We keep that more internally, but then I don't know any of the specifics, but I imagine that they want some information that, hey, like things happened in there. How that gets measured in a new medium, a lot of that stuff gets explored at the beginning, and then like 15 years later, it's like clearly defined. So what were the analytics that Google gave in the first like year or two? I don't know. Again, a lot of the stuff is, I don't know, so I'm talking more generally about it.
Thank you so much for having this talk. It's been really educational. Ross, in terms of, I know you can't speak too much to the Harry Potter and that, but in terms of the overall strategy and process for design, when designing these things out, what does that system look like, or what does that flow look like while you're trying to, discover the best way to be able to design a product for these people?
So there's kind of traditional ways in which just doing design and like, okay, brainstorming, everything else. So if you think that's the, or probably the more, or taking the context of the room, how do you do this with like new technologies in a new space and then begin to figure that all out? And it really just starts with exceptionally creative people and exceptionally bright like researchers and engineers, and then helping translate between the two of them. So like we talked about occlusion before, that makes sense where it's kind of real world interaction geometry. But then if you take the academic team that does that, that's monocular depth estimation. You hand that to a game designer and say, hey, here's monocular depth, or like, like monocular depth estimation. They're like, I don't know what to do with this. So it's a cross kind of pollination of technology and creative ideas, because the game designers and the kind of creative people who are like amazing, they can kind of work around some of the limitations of the technology, but they don't know what the limitations to work around, or what are the features that they can build given the current technology. So it actually just takes kind of getting these people together in a room and talking more the same language, so then you can come up with now what is very well known as like, okay, multiplayer, then you could do that like real-time collaborative SLAM is the academic version of that. Okay, you think about, or that's one version of that, there's several. And then you say, okay, persistence, then that's kind of relocalization on a large scale. So then it's like the kidnapped robot problem. So so again, just getting first off the vocabulary to getting the ideas flowing around so that both people understand both sides, which is why I think connecting the technology with the applications, whether that be in gaming or even outside of gaming, which is what we also look at Niantic, having that loop as tight as possible. So like where I can get up and be like, hey, like, would you use this? And then like they're like, I'd use that in this way. Having that loop as tight as possible I view as extremely important, especially in this new market, in this new technology space, because again, like getting the different perspectives together, that's what actually pushes the boundary forward, and that's how you close the gap in between the tech race and the application race, which is, I think, the #1 problem in augmented reality today. There's all like the different tech problems, the glasses, everything else. I think it's just tech needs, or the tech people need to get the application people up to the same level and thinking through, or not level, but like applications are the things that ultimately matter, but make sure that they're not just building tech for tech's sake.
Time for one more question here.
Okay. Or I can be quick and try and do two.
I'm Kevin Kelly here. You mentioned that you saw this coming convergence of robotics and AR. And could you just unpack that a little bit of what you mean by that?
So robotics is understanding the real world for a physical interaction, grabbing this bottle. Augmented reality is like having a Pikachu like kind of balance on one toe on top of the bottle. You still need to understand the bottle in the same way. So then as you get into more and more real world interactions, and again, thinking of the real world as content, then that is understanding the real world for kind of having a robot butler kind of help you out in there. So if you think about all the sensors that you need, the 3D understanding, the tracking on an augmented reality headset, minus the optics, and all the cloud kind of services and infrastructure that you need for that, is almost, from a technical perspective, almost identical to the robotics problem. Now what will change is what technology gets prioritized based off of the application. So I think that some technologies will be prioritized tremendously for augmented reality that may be like kind of not too needed for robotics, but in the span of all the different technologies that need to go in there, there is significant overlap between the two of them.
So it's that AR technologies will unlock robotics. It's not that it's going to replace our personal use of smart glasses or whatever comes after smart glasses.
And then this will be the last thing. Most problems that get solved, I view, are gradient problems, where you can iterate on them and kind of improve them slowly over time. So then like Airbnb kind of like expanding to different cities, and it's kind of like, how do you grow and how do you scale all this stuff? Google, even at the beginning, was a kind of a gradient problem. While like technologies like self-driving cars, or what I call cliff problems, kind of needs to work like 99.999% of the time for it to be functional, because otherwise if it works 99% of the time, that means you die 1 out of every 100 miles, which is like not okay. So then in robotics, there's a lot of cliff problems where you need to kind of like get it working so perfectly for there to be value, because like a robot butler that only works 80% of the time, that means you need to kind of fix it. Like even for like Roombas, when it gets stuck, it's kind of annoying. And then they're improving that more and more. But for augmented reality, like if you screw up, you have a floating Pikachu. It's almost a feature, not a bug. So then it's a more forgiving environment that you can begin to refine out all the different kind of problems that you'd have for a robotic application. So then I view that augmented reality is a wonderful gradient problem, especially if you have the application and the users. But then robotics is more cliff problems, but because of the analogies between the two of them, you can develop an AR and then transfer to robotics. And that's why I went from robotics into AR, because I'm like, well, that's a hard problem. This is a little bit more constrained and forgiving. Yep.
All right, we're getting kicked off the stage here. We're over. Thank you all for your attention.
Yep.